very much. Juan Carlos, please.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful panel, for the opportunity to catch up with good friends and to share my views in no better place than the Mexico Institute at the Wilson Center, that I think does a fantastic job in promoting the understanding between Mexico and the United States, the shared challenges that we have, and many of the things that are already spoken or will be spoken throughout today. Let me just very quickly go about an issue that is obviously affects the border, or it will affect the border, but it's more a more general perspective, and that is the review of the USMCA. I won't bother you with the statistics. You all know that Mexico's the largest trading partner for the U.S. The U.S. is Mexico's largest trading partner. Our two-way trade topples even the GDP of several G20 economies. You know all of that. But what probably we still have to dimension correctly is that in 2026, we all are going to have to, reinforce, reaffirm in a way that commitment that started in 2020 as the USMCA, but it dates back to 1994 as the NAFTA. And that is the idea of a regional integration project. That is the idea that the three countries have a common platform that not only identifies us and promotes all these exchanges that Bob was already talking about, but also that represents an opportunity to compare and see ourselves vis-a-vis other regions. Now, I'm putting that on the 2026 context because I see three potential scenarios for the review, which I must, again, underline. When we were negotiating the USMCA back in the day, we never spoke about a renegotiation. We spoke about a review. When we say it's not semantics, it's not only about semantics, because when we say that there is a renegotiation, we are questioning the commitments that we undertook. We are, in a way, putting a table open for anything that comes, and that was not the original intention. When we speak about a review, and think of this as the way that you would approach an issue in your organizations, you detect a problem, you have an assessment on that, then you develop a strategy to address the problem, and you implement the strategy. After some time, you assess whether the strategy was successful or not, and based on those results, you go one direction or the other. And to me, that will be the ideal scenario for the 2026 review. We sit down, we have the technical right people on board, it's a technically driven process, we detect what has worked very well, we check the box, we go about the things that we can do better, we devise a strategy for making those things better, and why not, maybe 2026 is very different from 2020. So many of the things that this trial by fire that Ambassador Wayne was saying, that we learned the hard way, how to insert or create more resilient supply chains, what to do with the digital technology that has increased several-fold since the USMCA went into effect, that could also be put on the table and have a review that is not only consistent with the original project, but also serves as a platform to the future. Now, that is my most optimistic scenario, and probably that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Hate to break it for you guys, but maybe that's not what's going to happen. So we need to be cognizant, and this is where the work of the Wilson Center and several others organizations and you and your organization can help. Because we need to be very aware that if the process of the review becomes a politically driven process rather than a technical process with some political priorities, we cannot really escape them. But if it becomes entirely a political situation, we probably are going to relive again, and I'm sure that everyone in this room remembers, we're going to relive again the situations that we had in 2017, 2018, that investments were withheld on the possibility that NAFTA could exist no more. Now, if that scenario by itself is not sufficiently daunting for you, consider how the geopolitical context is also playing a part on this. If we go on the worst possible path down that road on the 2026 review, with everything that is happening around the world, we are going to be losing a gigantic opportunity to project North America as the really best region that we can possibly have, and to not only strengthen ourselves, but also strengthen the vision of the future that we share. I will stop here, Ambassador, and I'll be happy to continue with the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Juan Carlos.
There are several things that we could probably consider for the USMCA review, but I will just point out that two of them. One is that the issue of the industrial policy. When I was studying, industrial policy was not a good term. It usually meant, throwing away money, but it's making a comeback. Maybe you have noticed it. But yeah, what we're seeing really in several of the decisions, even acts passed by Congress here in the U.S., including the IRA and others, that really is industrial policy. So we should probably start thinking to have some sort of, I don't know if I should call it North American industrial policy, but certainly to be cognizant of what we can do better by dividing up processes and production stages that currently are faced or are located elsewhere. That is what nearshoring is all about. So I don't see an industrial policy chapter in the USMCA, but I do see some of the elements that spark this cooperation and this coordination from an institutional approach. I could see that probably inserted into the USMCA. The other thing that we talk about here in Washington really is spoken widely, but that is China, because as I alluded on my first intervention, there's been already this attempt. I don't know if really it's deliberate or not, but this attempt to have the USMCA review as a way of preventing China from using Mexico as the backdoor to the United States. There's very, very little data to support that there is an actual concern on that. But clearly, it's not about what is currently happening, but what could happen in the future. Now, I'm happy to have that discussion, but that discussion also needs to be supported with data, because if we looked at where we are getting our imports from, well, that is basically China, and that means Mexico and the U.S. We are taking those inputs from China. And by the way, I heard in the earlier panel that the congressman, can't remember which one, I'm sorry, that said, well, we are going to be waking up one day and realizing that we were slipped at the wheel. That's what he said. I'm trying to quote him by heart. But I believe that we had this going on for over 20 years. If we looked at the trade data, Chinese inputs have been coming into North America for the past 20 years. And this paper, this is not, there will be a China panel later, so I won't steal their thunder. But on the paper that Ambassador Wayne mentioned that I wrote for the Wilson Center, that's one thing that I write in that paper. This was, in a way, even by design. We really decided to go in that direction. So if we are switching that, and this links back to my industrial policy comment, if we're switching back because of the reasons that might be, then the only way that we can do that, in addition to the trade angle, that is the USMCA review, it's by really producing some consistent and coherent, again, I'm reluctant to call it industrial policy, but let's call it industrial coordination, so to speak, in North America. And this goes back also to a point that I don't believe has been made. Yes, AMLO's policies, in my own personal view, are a breach of the USMCA obligations. If Claudia Sheinbaum does enact the policies that she has sort of sketched, it could also be a USMCA violation. The U.S. really needs to ask for the panel, for the dispute settlement panel, because what has been happening for the past 2 years, I think, is that the USTR requested what it's called, I won't get too technical, I promise, but they requested consultations, which is just the first stage of the panel, and that allows for a good number of days to go by so that parties can get the last shot at trying to settle these down peacefully. When those days have elapsed, and they have already by more than 2 years, then the U.S. or any other USMCA party is legally enabled to request the panel. And the U.S. and Canada, by the way, we speak about Mexico and the U.S., but we forget Canada. The Woodrow Wilson doesn't. They have a Canada seat there, thankfully. But the U.S. could ask for the panel to be established. That's really my whole point. And we might not necessarily, Richard, have to wait all until Claudia Sheinbaum really takes the reins of the country on October the 1st, when she will be sworn into office. Remember that the new Congress starts on September the 1st. That will incorporate the supermajority that Morena has. And if they follow through with the constitutional amendments that AMLO is trying to pass as his last act on office, among those reforms, here in Washington, the one that has gotten a lot of attention is the judicial reform, and rightfully so. But remember, let's remember that there is also a proposal to modify the Constitution to enshrine those 54-46, which is completely random, by the way. So we don't even probably have to wait until Claudia Sheinbaum is in office to see if she does it, but rather, if we get those constitutional amendments approved during September, then it's right there, Exhibit A, as the lawyers say, for a potential case, I would argue, but I mean, what do I know?
That would imply eliminating the CRE, which is Mexico's Energy Regulatory Commission, again, reinforcing what Juan Carlos just said.
Mean to monopolize the discussion. I'm sorry. I promise I will be brief. I don't want to leave you on a bad note, really. I mean, the USMCA has sustained this trial by fire that Tony Wayne and Diego Marroquin and I have spoken, and it will continue to do so. I'm convinced that what we have is much larger than the problems that really come by every single day. But because of that, we really need to treasure it, and we really need to make everything that we can to get it to have it ongoing as we do. If we just continue to concentrate on the politics, if we just continue to address or use the USMCA in our trading relationship and this economic strength that we have to sort of appease certain bilateral political problems, then we really are misunderstanding what the USMCA is all about. We're going to have the chance to reassess that 2026, and it's important that we get engaged and we get involved because stakeholders, like all of us, really are the ones who provide the support for the policy decisions that governments make, either endorsing them or questioning them. So let's get going on that.